everybody, good morning. So when I was in my flight on the way to Delhi for this event, I heard a conversation between a daughter and her mom. The daughter said, "The clouds have gone beneath us." The mom smiled and said, "Well, actually, we have risen above the clouds." Exhibit 1. Exhibit 2. While I was checking into the hotel, there was a bit of a scramble about finding my reservation. So the hotel staff, she entered my name and the other details that I was providing her with, but she couldn't find it in her email inbox. So I said, okay, how about you just type my first name? Because maybe all the characters don't match when you type all of them. So she typed just my first name and she found it. Now, why am I telling you all these random facts? Well, it needs some context, so let's rewind to a few months behind this year. So I have spent almost a decade helping academic authors polish their manuscripts by offering services like translation, editing, and now mentoring new editors on board. So earlier this year, I thought that, I have spent so much time helping researchers. What would it take to, get a seat at the table, to be a researcher myself? So in an overambitious moment, I decided to conduct my own research, just as a side gig, And I had big plans. I wanted to use satellite data to predict naval movements and even maybe oil prices. But given that this was a side gig, my infrastructure and time were limited. So I decided to go for something more feasible or practical, or in other words, the low-hanging fruit. I decided to focus on the effect of inflation on different income groups. Now, this is a topic that has been studied time and again, year after year, by several authors. So what could I contribute to the field? The thing is, the last financial year, 2024 to 2025, has seen a lot of changes geopolitically. So I figured instead of focusing on years that authors have already studied and duplicating efforts, how about I just focus on the recent year and how the geopolitical changes have affected, the relationship between inflation and income inequality. So the plan was simple. I just had to, pull up some numbers, run them by a regression model, derive some conclusions, and call it a day. Except that day never came. So my models, they made sense statistically speaking, all right? The R squared was perfect, the multicollinearity was fine, heteroscedasticity was fine, I ran a couple of robustness checks, all good, but they were telling me the same old story. That okay, inflation has different effects on different income groups. Now that is something we already knew at the outset, right? It's not something new to us. So basically the numbers were numbering, but there was no music. And I was a little heartbroken at that point because, I was kind of knee deep in sunk cost territory. I had already invested some efforts in, getting thus far, so I didn't want to abandon it all of a sudden because I was invested, but at the same time I was a little frustrated to keep going without anything concrete. So I knew what the problem is, but knowing and accepting are two different things. So the problem was that my research was a short-term research. Like I said, I purposely focused on the last 1 year and the geopolitical changes that happened, right? Because previous years were already studied by other authors. But the problem with short-term research is that, numbers don't have the luxury of time to stabilize. Models get jittery, patterns get jittery. So yeah, this was basically on the back burner for some time, and I just, was on this midnight spiral, and I chose to self-soothe in the worst way possible by listening to sad songs like "Hello Darkness, my old friend, I've come to talk with you again." So perhaps that line about talking to silence or darkness hit me different. It always does, doesn't it? So I said, okay, if the numbers are not telling me the story I want to hear, how about I change the way I listen? So the next morning, I started reading documents. I started reading, documents by government agencies, NGOs, institutions like the World Bank, whatever was available publicly, I started reading that. And initially, I did not have a plan at all, but slowly patterns started to emerge, and I was able to conduct a thematic analysis to kind of support my regression. So far, so good. Now, one day when I was excitedly discussing the findings of my thematic analysis with a colleague, they randomly commented that, hey, it's good you're studying about inflation. It's affected all of us. Even I've stopped buying from brand XYZ. That's when it hit me that among all the fancy things in the world, the regression models, thematic analysis and everything, I was studying a real world problem, but I had not thought of humanizing my research by doing the most basic thing of them all, by talking to people. So that's when I decided to add a layer of surveys to my study. Of course, my colleague was my first unsuspecting participant, my unsuspecting volunteer. I sought his informed consent later, but that's not the point now. Jokes apart. This is where the focus of my research suddenly changed. Instead of being about inflation's impact on different income groups, it was now about how to help researchers who feel stuck just like I did. All right? So, how to help researchers conduct short-term research, taking the example of inflation and everything just as a case study on the side, not as my main focus. Because science today is not about gatekeeping, it's about open access, it's about sharing your knowledge, and in fact, the number of authors who refer to your paper and who cite your paper in the future is a success metric. So, yeah, this is where the research focus changed. But the thing is, when you are giving authors, some guidance that, hey, when you conduct mixed methods research, use some quantitative analysis, some thematic analysis, and add some surveys swad anusar. That's hardly helpful, right? When you're giving somebody a recipe, there needs to be a sequence or an order. Now, when conducting mixed methods research, for example, I prefer one sequence over the other, like conducting quantitative analysis before qualitative. Some others prefer qual before quant, vice versa. Everybody has their own preferences. But I didn't want my preferences to, bias my recommendation to the researchers. I didn't want to say that, hey, I have used this has worked for me, so this should work on you as well. I'm, imposing it on them. That's not what I wanted. So I decided to resort to large language models, LLMs, the AI kind, the elephant in the research room. I presented an LLM with two sets of prompts. One set had the quantitative analysis before the qualitative one. The other set had the qualitative before the quantitative one. I ran this prompt a couple of times so that it wasn't a fluke. And I asked the model, please give me a combined interpretation of the findings, but analyze them in the order which I have given you. And it was heartening to see that the results from this little LLM experiment, the AI analysis was much richer when I started off with quantitative and then followed by qualitative. So I had a sequence that I could prescribe, other researchers that start with this, then do this, then do this, instead of just, throwing in things at random. So when I decided to put this research into the world, it was met with wildly different reactions. Some reviewers immediately rejected it because they saw the use of LLMs as a potential red flag. Another set of reviewers saw this very use of LLMs as, a novel contribution. Something that could guide future research. And it is thanks to this latter set of reviewers that my work found its home on platforms like Sage's Social Science Space, Rising Scholars, Scholarly Kitchen, etc. But why am I sharing this with you today? Without even, focusing on the results, because the results are available on my blogs for the curious reader, but that's for another day. The point today is, when I started off, I just wanted to check a box that I have my name on a published manuscript. When things didn't go as per my plan, I started grieving them as if they were something extraordinary according to my limited vision. Little did I know that the very thing that I considered as my limitation was going to be the main focus of my study, to help other researchers with their limitations. You know, it's like flipping the perspective. Like, it brings me back to that conversation between the mom and daughter in the plane, that whether the clouds are under us or we are above them. It's just a shift in perspective. So when I started, adopting the blue sky approach, just reading things without a plan, it opened my mind to the grander scheme of things which may have better plans than I did. And so am I saying that researchers should not have a plan, should not have a hypothesis? Absolutely not. It's a good starting point. But it's just a compass. Don't make it your cage. Our strength lies in our flexibility to pivot. Just like, the receptionist of the hotel. She said, I told her to search only one keyword. Don't make your search so specific that it becomes difficult to find an outcome. That's what I meant. Not that we shouldn't have a hypothesis or an idea in mind. So as researchers, we can just be open to learning and unlearning, researching actively on the field and discovering things in silence in the shower. I would like to end with a story that I heard from Swami Chinmayananji, the founder of Chinmaya Mission. Once, there was a saint who lived with his disciples in a cave. And he wanted to show his disciples the light beyond the exit of the cave. Every time he would lead his disciples out, he would turn back when he would reach the exit, and he would see that the disciples have stayed behind or they've gone behind. This happened 2 to 3 times. So finally what he did is he went behind the disciples and he let them lead the way so that they could see what he did not see. But just a second more. I was very comfortable with the darkness in the cave that night when I heard, "Hello darkness, my old friend." But maybe the higher intellect decided to give me a push. And the fact that I could progress beyond the ordinary in research terms is proof of concept that anybody can. Thank you so much.